Welcome to the Cowboy Up Podcast, where talk is all about the West. This episode is brought to you by White Stallion Ranch and produced by Cowboy Spirit USA. Bill Markley, one of our favorite Western historians, joins us today. He'll shed some light on some famous and infamous Westerners. Did Butch Cassidy really die in Bolivia? Stay tuned to find out.
Hey, Alan. This is one of our lucky days. We got Bill Markley here, one of our favorite guests.
He's been here before and hit a home run, and glad to have him back. We'll do another.
Well, Bill's sitting here, so I'm gonna be giving him his resume back to him. He's as we know from his books, he's one of the best historians of Western history. He's got a bunch of his books in his name, including Wild Bill Hickok and Buffalo Bill Cody, Plainsman of the Legendary West, Standoff at High Noon, Old West Showdown, a longtime member of the Western Writers of America. He's the author of a dozen books. He's also been in films, including Dances with Wolves. He has participated in Civil War and Western Frontier reenacting. He's traveled widely, including Antarctica. That's pretty widely. What were you doing there?
Well, first, thanks for having me here at the White Stallion Ranch, one of my favorite places on earth.
Oh, thank you.
We're going to spend a couple of nights here, so it'll be fun. Antarctica. It was back in college. My major professor got a grant from the National Science Foundation to go to Antarctica. Invited me along to carry equipment and drill holes and do all the mule work down there. So got to go down twice and loved every minute of it. If you like remote areas, it's the place to go.
Yeah, well, that's good on your resume. I love to hear you've been there. I'm jealous.
Well, it says here also you explored in the South Pacific, you've kayaked and backpacked in Alaska, you've chaperoned Boy Scouts in Japan, of course, explored the American West, and you and your wife, Liz, live in Pierre, South Dakota, a good place to be away from maybe right now in Arizona.
Right, yeah. Pierre's good in the summertime, but if you're not used to a lot of snow and wind and cold temperatures, you might want to stay away for a month or two.
Well, your background is so broad that it's hard to hone down on one area. But I have one I want you to talk about a little. I want you to talk about Butch Cassidy.
Yeah, Butch Cassidy. I've studied several outlaws, and everybody, even the bad guys, have likable traits. And I came to find that I like Butch Cassidy probably the best of all the bad guys out there.
Talk more about it. I want to hear.
I mean, everything you read about him, he was a gentleman. Whenever they were robbing somebody, he tried not to get anybody killed. And so I thought even though they were stealing, I thought it was admirable that he was trying not to get anybody hurt as they took the money. So whereas others like, Jesse James, I mean, he could be a cold-hearted killer. If you were standing in the way of him getting to what he wanted, he would eliminate you. Yeah. But Butch was not that way.
Well, how long was his career? How long was he a robber?
Well, that's interesting because, as everybody's seen in the movie Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, they die in a hail of bullets in San Vicente in Bolivia. But as I talk about in our book, Standoff at High Noon, the two guys that were killed in that shootout were never identified. And the Pinkertons were still out looking for Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid after that. And so there are people out there, and I have to say that now I am a believer that those two guys were not Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid. There are two other hombres that were
They probably paid them to go out there and not thinking they were going to be killed, or what?
No, I think Butch and Sundance were already on their way out of South America. The Pinkertons had tracked them down in Argentina. They'd been ranching in Argentina and Patagonia for a while. And then the Pinkertons found out about them, got on their trail. they sold their cattle and ranch and headed over into Chile and started, disappearing from there. The two guys that robbed the payroll, the mining payroll, and then were wiped out in San Vicente, their whole mode of robbery and escape was totally different from Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid.
Just didn't fit their mode.
Did not fit their mode of operation. Butch and Sundance always had a string of horses set up along the way so that they could ride a horse, get a fresh horse, keep one riding, get as far away from the scene of the robbery as possible. These two guys dawdled around, within 10 miles of where they robbed, and just didn't act like Butch and Sundance. So I seriously believe it was not them.
Was there any word later of them showing up? Or?
There were. The Pinkertons got the information that they believed they were in the south of France, Riviera, other places. There were sightings, and they, as soon as they would swoop in, they would skedaddle, and so they just kind of vanished into history. Now there are accounts of Butch Cassidy coming back and visiting the family, and there was an imposter who even fooled some of Butch's old friends as to being Butch, but that guy was later discounted. Butch's sister said that he had visited their dad's farm when she was a little girl. So, there's two sides to the story. I mean, those that believe, they were killed there. But again, there was no identification on them to say who they were. And to me, their mode of operation just didn't fit the bill for Butch and Sundance.
So I've seen a couple of documentaries, and I use the word loosely, I guess, maybe, because I have no idea how. But I've seen people on these shows a couple of different times, and they know that. And Sundance Kid just seems to not be part of that survival story. It seems to be much more centered on Butch. But where, he's buried on the ranch in, I think it's Wyoming or something, and that he came back. Have you seen any of that he ended up back in the U.S. and died there, or do you have a guess where he did die?
The Sundance Kid?
No, Butch.
Oh, Butch.
Yeah. Sundance Kid never seems to be addressed. It just seems like he disappeared somehow.
Yeah, Butch, just there are certain places where people say he's here or there, but I don't know.
None of that is.
None of that. No,
and
it's a mystery.
Where did the original idea that the two guys who died in Bolivia were them? How did that start?
That came about by a mining engineer, and I'm sorry I don't have my notes in front. I have no notes.
That's okay.
Everything's
You're not supposed to.
I write because I don't remember anything. So I write everything down. But anyway, there was a mining engineer, and his name escapes me, but about 20 years after all this happened, he wrote an article for a magazine, and that's where that whole story came from.
Which makes it kind of weak.
Yeah, I think so. And he mentioned these two guys worked for him in the mine, and then they robbed the payroll coming up to the mine. One of these guys, and maybe they claimed, I think one of the deals was they did claim to be Butch and Sundance. But, anybody can claim to do this. One of the guys wrote a letter back to the mine. And in the letter, he talks about, disrespecting women. And Butch was never known to disrespect women. And he also talked about beating a mule, and Butch never ever mistreated animals. So in my mind, those two things really tell me something about the character of the guy who wrote the letter, who was apparently one of these guys that didn't fit the character of Butch Cassidy. So
plus, per your research, why would they abandon a successful escape strategy or tactic?
Yeah.
And dawdle around.
Right.
Interesting. So,
and the one guy, and then they get, the movie shows 100 soldiers coming in and getting him. They were surrounded by like 3 guys. There was only 3 guys out there. And
oh, really?
Yeah. And the one guy, he gets shot, and he shoots the other guy in the head and then commits suicide.
That was the end?
That was the end. Yeah, they didn't die in a hail of bullets. The one shot his friend and then committed suicide. So, it just doesn't, to me personally, others may say, he's a bunch of
And no later word about Butch Cassidy showing up somewhere else or anything?
Well, they do. The Pinkertons were still on their trail for years. I mean, this story never came up with the Pinkertons. And in their work, they followed them into France and that sort of thing.
So Pinkertons were they're like PIs / private police.
Right.
Who was funding all this searching?
Well, whoever they robbed, the trains or the people that were shipping the funds, they would hire the Pinkertons to go out, and the main thing is to bring back the goods, the money, and if you apprehend these guys, all the better, or kill them, great, but the main goal was to get the money back.
But I mean, I have to ask, is that reasonable? I mean, these guys have a habit of robbing, right? They did a lot of robberies.
Yeah.
So they didn't just get the big payoff and go buy the rancho in Argentina. They kept robbing. So my inference is they were spending as they were robbing. So this dedication to funding these Pinkertons to go international to find them was part of that vengeance? I mean, were the railroads trying to make examples of them?
I never thought of it that way, but yeah, possibly. Yeah. I mean, and just to put an end to their robbing. You think about, private firm, and the Pinkertons are still around too.
Right.
Is that right?
I better be careful here. No, but they're still around. Agency and protection and things like that. In fact, when they dug up, when Jesse James' grave was exhumed, because some people said, it's not really Jesse buried there, and they did some DNA research and stuff. It was the Pinkertons that guarded the whole operation there. So, which I think is kind of funny, because the Pinkertons were after, Jesse and everyone.
And they were a pretty feared bunch, right? I mean,
the
Pinkertons at that time, they were pretty relentless and pretty brutal, weren't they?
Yeah, they surrounded Jesse and Frank's mom's house, believing that they were in the house at the time, and actually tried to blow it up. They threw a bomb in there, and it blew up and killed Jesse's younger half brother, and blew off. Well, it mangled their mom's arm, and they had to amputate it, and she survived. But the Pinkertons, they were always strike breakers and went after the Molly Maguires in Pennsylvania and that sort of thing. So they'd go out and assassinate people, and back in the day, I'm sure they don't do it today.
I'm sure they have a cleaner reputation than they deserve to have, it sounds like.
Mercenary law enforcement, so to speak.
But they got their start, guarding Abraham Lincoln as he went to Washington, D.C. during the start of the Civil War. So
when he was under great threat then.
Oh, yeah, he was. Yeah.
So, Butch, you talked about good criminals, so to speak, if there is such thing.
Or better
what about Sundance Kid? I mean, since they were allied, what about him?
What's kind of funny, he's from eastern Pennsylvania originally and headed west, and kind of a horse wrangler, and eventually wrangled horses that weren't his, and got into trouble that way, and stole a saddle, if I remember, and wound up in as a kid, wound up in jail in Sundance, Wyoming. And they kept him in the county jail there because they thought he was too young to send him to the state penitentiary. So that's where he got the nickname Sundance Kid there. But off and on, he would, ride with different groups. And, and he and Butch rode together a few times. And
they weren't longtime partners.
No, they weren't longtime partners. And a lot of these outlaws would kind of come together and go. It was not like, we're a group and we're sticking together the whole time. I mean, it was a fluid situation with these guys. But I mean, Sundance and Butch and Etta Place, who was Sundance's wife or lover, there's discrepancy there. They both went together down to Argentina with Butch, and Butch was, represented himself as being their brother and that sort of thing. So they hung out together more towards the end of their careers.
No record of Butch ever coming back to the United States after.
Well, Butch, but and Sundance did a little. Harry Longenbaugh, I think, was his last name. He was his real name. He came back to the States a few times, visited his relatives in southeastern Pennsylvania, and
he reports post Bolivia.
There was.
So both of them were.
But again, it's kind of funny because he was killed in Nicaragua here. He was seen in a bar down there. It's all these guys just popping up. You don't know what's real, what's not.
Well, on that, we're going to take a break.
Thank you very much, and we appreciate you listening to this fine program. The Cowboy Up Podcast is brought to you by What It Takes Radio. We're a podcasting and publishing company, and we're in the business of helping people like you and Russell and Alan tell their story, share their experiences, and, give a little bit of wisdom, insight, and truth with a touch of wit. A sense of humor to make life a little more interesting, a little more exciting, and perhaps even a bit inspiring. Hey, if you are involved in all of that kind of world and work that has a story to tell, we'd love to help you. Particularly if you are in the cowboy genre. You see, the Cowboy Spirit USA is the production company of What It Takes Radio, and we are looking for people right now who have a story to tell, and they would like to share their experiences and their stories, just like Russell and Alan do, because we've got a number of opportunities, particularly for those of you who live and breathe and want to share the Western way of life. So if that's you and you'd like to see if perhaps you could do something like they are doing, I guarantee you probably can. Why don't you reach out to me at stan@witradio.net. That's very simple. stan@witradio.net. And you know what? I bet we will find a way to get you, your friends, your family, your story on the radio.
So, Bill, was there, our family's from Wyoming, and I know a lot of folks up there. Was there a hole-in-the-wall gang?
Yeah, there was the hole-in-the-wall gang, kind of based out of the southern part of the Bighorn Mountains there. And then there was also the Wild Bunch, which was further west, where the corner of, southwest Wyoming and Colorado, Utah, they all come together. And the Wild Bunch was out of that way. And Butch was part of the Wild Bunch for a while. And the Sundance Kid was part of the Hole-in-the-Wall gang for a bit. And the Outlaws would all, it wasn't like one monolithic group of people. They would come and go and join. Pretty fluid, coming and going all the time. Yep. Some people would join for a while and leave and never come back, and outlaw for a little bit and then go straight. And it was just a fluid situation.
What did you think of the movie Butch and Sundance? My dad, he didn't like those movies. He said, I don't like celebrating criminals. It was a great movie. People loved it. Oh, what do you think?
Yeah, one of my favorite movies. But again, it's really fiction. If you think about a movie where it says based on a true story, that's about the end of it. After that, anything goes. You can throw in anything you want. Yeah. So I chuckle every time I see something based on a true story. It's not the true story, but based on a true story.
Yeah. Good use of language.
Yeah. Yeah. Bob Bosbell, editor or owner of True West magazine, he and I had a discussion about, what is history? Everybody has their bias and writes things kind of the way they want to see it, or maybe leaves out certain facts that they want, don't like or whatever. And that's one of the things that I think people really need to know, that you need to do a lot of research. You need to look at a variety of different things to find out what really is the truth, if you can find it. Because think about this. If we were all sitting here right now and only one of us writes about us, and that person says the other two guys were horrible people and no one else ever wrote about them, everybody later in history would think those two people were horrible people, but they could have been the best people in the world. But that one guy wrote that down and no one can contest it. Yeah. So history's kind of fluid.
Well, and your example, mining engineer whose name you didn't remember, wrote a story 10 years after, and suddenly they got killed in Bolivia.
Right.
And every other fact you've given us today suggests that's not what happened. So, yeah, there you go.
Yeah. There was a real quick in the Upper Missouri. There was a guy named Kenneth McKenzie, and he was a fur trader, an established post, and Fort Union up there, and he had trading agreements with like about 25 different tribes. But biographers of other mountain men, I think they needed somebody to have kind of a foil to spar against, and they created him into this turncoat American who wore a red coat. Said, therefore he must be British to be the bad guy against the other mountain men. But after I researched things, I thought, if this guy is so bad, how could he have 25 agreements with all these warring tribes to come in and trade? And one time a guy stole a horse. Instead of hanging him, he just had him flogged and sent down the river. So I don't think he was as bad of a guy as some of the writers made him out to be. So
I'm interested in Jeffords.
Okay. Yeah.
Talk a little about that. He's kind of a legendary guy in this world.
Right. Yeah. I think he was. Think about somebody who can go in and meet with Cochise and have his own personal agreement with him while Cochise is killing any American he can get his hands on, and they become fast friends.
And how much of that is legend and how much of that's real? That's
I think that's real. That he and Cochise became good friends, and he was used then. The army used him to, kind of be the go-between to work with Cochise and come up with, the Chiricahua Reservation, which was, centered down there around Fort Bowie. I think he was a legitimate character.
Is my memory correct that Tom Jeffords, which the fictional book, historical fiction, Blood Brother, was written about him and Cochise, he was in charge of the mail or something, and the Apaches kept disrupting it, and he just rode right into Cochise's camp, and the audacity and courage led to a friendship. Is that a correct story?
Yes, yeah. I'm not sure about the mail. I can't remember. Again, I don't have my notes.
But he rode into camp, right? And
they became good friends, and all the way through. In fact, when they set up the reservation, Cochise said, for my agent, I want Jeffords as my agent. And he didn't want to do it. And Cochise said, there's no treaty, nothing unless Jeffords is the man. And he finally said, okay, I'll do it, even though he didn't want to do it.
Right. And it sort of died almost as a recluse in the Owl Head Butte area of Tortolitas?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah. Jeffords last. And there's a picture of him out in front of his little interesting guy.
Yeah, he was.
So we've talked about some real interesting folks. Davy Crockett. Legend.
Yeah. Well, in Kellen Cutsforth and I, again, put this book where we take controversial stories from the Old West. Each chapter is a different story. Kellen tells one side, I tell the other side. So one of our chapters is called The Many Deaths of Davy Crockett, because there are several different accounts as to how he died. Of course, I grew up watching Disney's Fess Parker dying at the, swinging his musket going down, at the end.
At the Alamo.
At the Alamo. And to me, that's the way it goes, I mean, it's stuck in my head. That's the way it goes. But so I had that side of the story that he went down swinging, and Kellen had the other side of the story, which people say that he was captured at the end and then Santa Anna had him executed. Well, so there was a group of Texans that were captured, 4 or 5, and Santa Anna had them executed. But no one actually said, yes, that was Davy Crockett that was executed. But there was a guy that some say had the characteristics. So there is an account that the people that say he was captured, executed by a Mexican colonel, I believe. I think it was, I can't remember, his name was Pena or something like that. Again, no notes. But he had an account of the Mexican army coming up through Texas and that sort of thing. And in there, he talks about this Texan or this Tennessean and I don't know if he uses Crockett or whatever, but everybody says, okay, this is Crockett. Well, the interesting thing about that book is that the pages that have that account on it are different, and they're just slipped in there, different, and it's different handwriting than the rest of that journal. And so the pro people that say, yeah, he was executed, killed, said, no, that's it, that's true, that's the way it is. People that are against it say, no, look, it's somebody that wrote that and slipped it in there. It could have been done, 10, 20 years later. So that's just an ongoing battle that'll probably never end. But I'm on the side that he went down swinging, because there were several people that said they saw his body laying in a certain spot with the rest of his Tennesseans at the Alamo, around this cannon outside the main sanctuary there. So,
and that's in your book, Standoff at High Noon, with your co-writer
Kellen Cutsforth.
Right, and we had you guys on, and it was one of my favorite podcasts ever. Listening to you guys go at each other. Yeah, that was fun.
You still write with him?
I'm sorry, what?
You still write with him?
Oh yeah, we're good friends, but we haven't written anything recently. Those series of books are now done for now, but doesn't mean we can't start them up in the future sometime.
Oh, those are great. Which side? Just quick review, because I always have to ask about the OK Corral.
Yeah. And
Cowboys Good, Cowboys Bad. Which was your side?
Kellen did the Earp side. I did the Clint McLaury side. So, and the more I dug into it, it's like, hey, they were just on their way out of town when the Earps walked down there and started
the fight. Huh?
Yeah.
So
now a lot of people would not agree with that.
Yeah, no, I'm not a historian, but I come down on the Earp side. Those boys were wrestlers one way or the other.
Well, sure, but just take them and throw them in jail and have a trial then.
Yeah, there would be that. There's another way.
The rule of law.
Jesse James, you brought him up earlier, I think.
Yeah.
And let's talk about his fame. And you talked about how he was a cold-blooded killer at times.
Jesse and Frank, the James boys, Jesse and Frank, they were very successful outlaws. I mean, and I think one of the things is that they
stop. Successful meaning they did a lot, or they robbed a lot of money, or how's?
Yeah, I mean, think about it. They're successful in robbing banks and trains. I mean, think about the locomotive and the train. I mean, it was the highest technology we had at the time, and they were able to stop the train, get it on, and go to the express car where the money was being hauled and get that. I mean, they were masters at what they did. And they were masters at disguise and getting away and changing their names and living in communities for years without anybody knowing that, hey, it's Jesse and Frank. And they're really the start of their downfall was when they went up to Northfield, Minnesota, and tried to rob the bank there, and that pretty much failed. I mean, they got away with like $23.15 or something like that, and the younger brothers were all, shot up and captured. But Frank and Jesse were able to get away. Make their way back into Missouri and disappear for a while and form a new gang eventually. So.
And have I read lately, and I'm foggy on this, is there some controversy about that Robert Ford killed him?
Yeah. There are people out there that believe, and there were imposters, that Jesse did not die in St. Joe, Missouri by the Ford brothers, that it was a setup, that there was another guy that they shot and then used his body as Jesse's body, and Jesse lived on.
Was that to throw the officers off track?
Well, yeah, if that was the case, but I'm on the side that no, they actually did kill Jesse there. His son, years later, there were several imposters, and one of the more famous ones was convincing a lot of people that he really was Jesse James. And Jesse's son was living out in California at the time, and he was kind of ill, but his wife was very upset about this imposter. She traveled back to Missouri to confront this guy and took along a pair of Jesse's boots. And Jesse had very small feet. And so she brought the boots and the guy that made the boots along to verify these are the boots that I made for Jesse James. Yeah. And he said, try the boots on. And the guy's feet would not fit in the boots. And they go, goodbye.
No kidding.
Cowboy Cinderella.
Never heard a story like that. That's a great story.
Yeah, that's it. That's
wow.
it. Yeah. So, I think they thought there was maybe 25 imposters out there. Jesse's son had counted at one time. 25. And one of them traveled around the county fair circuits along with the Brushy Bill, the guy that claimed he was Billy the Kid. And they even did a radio interview back in the late 40s, early 50s, along with another guy that said he was, Cole Younger. The three imposters. It's pretty funny. But people still believe, some of these guys lived on. And so in our books then, we document, we try to show, okay, this is the information. Those that think they lived on, this is the information that's out there that they use to seriously believe that Billy lived on, Jesse lived on. And so we try to present that so people can make up their own minds on things and try to keep our bias out of things. But it's hard. Everybody has a bias, and no matter what.
I love listening to you. It's so good that you come today to give us some more things to think about.
Well, thanks for inviting me too. It's great to be here. Before
we get off, we're both cattle ranchers. Talk a little bit about the Johnson County War.
Okay, Johnson County War. It was the big cattlemen versus the little ranchers. It took place in Johnson County, Wyoming, where Buffalo is, near the Bighorn Mountains there. The little ranchers, if you remember, during this time period, this would have been like the early 1890s, cattle roamed free across the range, and everyone would they'd have roundups, bring the cattle in and brand, the calves to whatever the mother cow had, they would brand the calves to that. Well, the big rancher, the big cattlemen, most of them were absentee people that maybe lived in the East Coast, even over in Great Britain. And then they had hired men to take care of it. Anyway, they started believing that the little ranchers were taking maverick cows and branding calves that they shouldn't be branded and claiming them as their own. And things started heating up. And it's a very complicated, convoluted story. But the big cattlemen had connections with the state government, the news media at the time, and they finally said the state legislature. It's kind of funny. The state constitution said there can be no armed militia in Wyoming without the permission of the state government. So the state legislature shuts down for, a few months, whatever. And a couple of the big cattlemen after they leave, they bring in something like 30 Texans, gunmen, on a special train, come up from Denver to Cheyenne, along with a car with dynamite and all kinds of weapons and horses that were bought in Colorado, not Wyoming, because they didn't want to tip off the little ranchers. But they had a death list of people that they were going to go hang or shoot, including the sheriff of Johnson County, all the county commissioners, the head of the newspaper there. They had all these people.
They were all on the death list?
They were on the death list.
Whoa, these guys were serious.
They were serious. They brought in these killers, and then they had a special train that took them out as far as they could go. They got on their horses and started riding towards Buffalo, Wyoming, to take care of people. And they ran into a couple of guys along the way, Nate Champion and a couple others, and surrounded them and killed them. And the news finally got out, and it was kind of like the Minutemen, everybody rose up and swarmed together and surrounded these guys, and they retreated to a ranch that was called the TA Ranch. And the ranch is still there, and you can see where they cut holes in the barn to shoot out of, and bullet holes through some of the boards. And they were surrounded by the little ranchers, the big ranchers, and the Texans were now, held up at the TA Ranch. Somebody was able to sneak out. They sent a telegram to the governor, and then he sent a telegram to the president of the United States, who then eventually sent a telegram to the local cavalry at Fort, and they went out and broke up the whole fight. They arrested the Texans and everyone, took them to Cheyenne. And
wasn't that standoff a couple of days?
Yes.
I remember reading about that.
Yeah, several days.
Days long.
Yep. It's kind of funny because they captured the dynamite from the big ranchers or the big cattlemen, and they were just about ready to push. They built this cart wagon, and they had the dynamite in there, and they were pushing it towards the barn, and they were going to blow the whole thing up. And that's when the cavalry came to the rescue. So they led off the Texans and the big cattlemen to Cheyenne. And in the courts, things delayed until Johnson County ran out of public funds to continue to come after the ranchers. And then they just said, well, okay, you can't come after them anymore in court. We're just going to let them all go. And so the whole thing faded away, and no one ever was tried for the murder of Nate Champion and the other guys. And to this day, in Johnson County, you can see bumper stickers. Don't trust Wyoming state government, that sort of thing. So kind of a crazy story.
But that was the end of the war.
Yeah. Well, there was still little trickles of somebody shooting somebody else here and there. When I went to research it at the Buffalo Library, when I talked to the head librarian there, she said, when I told her what I was doing, she said, well, which side are you researching? And I said, well, the rustler side. She said, well, there was 5 different sides. I'm going, okay, well.
Wow.
But yes, there's still some people that are still kind of, a little concerned with each other of which side they were on out that way. So it's kind of funny.
Well, you go to a saloon in Tombstone, they're still arguing about the Earps and the Clantons. Those things hang on. Yeah. Well, we could go forever, but we have run out of time, actually. So thanks for being here, Bill. And, we give, great referrals to all those books. Standoff at High Noon. I'm looking at The Plainsman of the Legendary West, which is, we talked last time about Wild Bill Hickok and Buffalo Bill Cody, how people confuse them because of the Bill. Right. And 2 very different guys with a lot of common ground. So where do people find the list of your books?
Sure. Well, you can go to my website, which is billmarkley.com, and they're all listed there. Or you can get them on any internet site, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, or you can order them through your local bookstore.
And look up billmarkley.com, MARKLEY.com, billmarkley.com.
Right.
You don't know how much a pleasure it is to have you come again, Bill.
Well, thanks.
And we're happy to have you again and again, because you always have fresh stories and really good ones to tell.
Yeah, I mean, the Old West is just filled with all kinds of fun stories, you know. So
well, and I think your Standoff at High Noon is such a great, because, you know, we've talked about how history gets reinterpreted all the time, and it's a great way to present both sides.
Right, yeah. And then choose which side you want, check our sources out, and see what you want to believe.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again. BillMarkley.com. You know, families and dude ranches, that's what people think of when they think of dude ranches. And of course, White Stallion Ranch is no different. Outdoor activities, there's all kinds of things to do together. Horseback riding, rock climbing, archery, shooting, hiking, tennis, basketball, horseshoes, swimming pool, hot tub. I don't know if you do spa services together, but we've got those. And of course, the game room with all those games and evening entertainment. Families really get together and enjoy that. But one of the great experiences is giving the kids a bit of independence. And you can't really absorb that until you experience it. And watching your kid run off with a bunch of other kids to go off on a ride without you, or playing games after dinner, or going, hey, Mom, Dad, we're heading over to the game room, see you at dinner. It's just not too many places you get to do that. And people my age, we had a bit of history with that, but it just, the world today, it's a bit different. I think most importantly, the families leave with that memory of really truly experiencing a vacation, and a pretty varied vacation, all together, and with all those experiences shared, sometimes together, most of the time together, but not always, and everybody finding something they really enjoy. So whitestallion.com, all the information, the website's pretty extensive, and you can call 888-977-2624, or most easily whitestallion.com.
Well, I've just sat here today and was fascinated with Bill Markley and his stories, and it just made me understand more how important those kind of stories are, that our history is what it is, but we need to embrace that. And I'm a big history fan, but I think we all can learn from the history of the West, but also specifically of Arizona. I'm interested in that. So was just thrilled to be here today.
Well, you know, Bill's a legend himself now with his writing, and I love history as you do. And I was talking to one of our staff this morning, and we were just talking about, you know, what is I don't remember who said it, but, you know, those who don't learn history are doomed to repeat it. And, you know, that's a broader perspective, but one that is so important.
Hey, thanks for joining us today, and thank you to Stan Houston's production team for making this episode possible. If you'd like to be a sponsor or have a guest suggestion, or just want to say, hey, email us at thecowboyuppodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. And be sure to tune in next week when the Cowboys talk with Roger Naylor about his new book, Awesome Arizona. Until then, I'm Lynn Weezy Sneed, reminding you to stand tall and ride safe.